Okay, well, forget everything I said then, and I will call the meeting to order of capital budget 3/29/21 at 7:04 p.m. Now the open meeting police won't get too mad at us, I hope. So, Mike, you had a bunch of questions on this pilot program.
Yeah, I have a number of concerns with some of her explanations. I don't feel that they're adequate. I'm thinking about the number of classrooms involved. She feels that we need one classroom in each school. I would disagree with that. I would want to try and limit this pilot to the lowest number that it can be done for. So while it required or essential that all of those schools and all of those teachers and all those super users be designated, I would say no. I have other questions down that road, but I'll leave it at that as one major concern.
Just to sort of take that a little further.
Okay.
I did a quick calculation, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but there are 102 classrooms. And if you take away the 4 classrooms they're piloting, that leaves you with 98. And if you want to outfit all the other classrooms with the same technology, you're talking about $1.2 million plus, which is a pretty hefty price tag in my mind. And we're not sure what this is going to bring to the classroom.
Right. Now, I did ask her for some studies, and she did include them. I'm not much of an educator, but you know, the case that they're making to me does not seem so compelling that we need to jump on this one. I understand the need to stay current with educational techniques. We don't want our kids to not be able to manage whatever comes after high school. But I would want to get a direct connection between how does this help a graduating senior, assuming that one student goes all the way through Cohasset school system. She points out also, now I'm just going off the top of my head, I didn't break it all down. She also points out that, yes, we could replace the current technology, which are projectors. And she makes the point that in 2 years' time, there'll be, I'm not sure if I have to reread, but I don't know if she said they're obsolete or in 2 years' time, they'd have to be replaced, was what she said. And I don't see the connection between something that was bought 2 years prior and the need to replace it. It may be older technology. It may not be the most up-to-date technology. But if we're trying to keep our costs really to the minimum, and I'm going from that premise that we really are trying to be very tight, then I would really need to be convinced that, you know, replacing projectors as they fail might be what we have to do at this point. That's where I would like to see our discussion go. So those are two pieces that I took away from what she replied on. And there are others, but I need to go back and look through that document one more time and literally lay out a memo, if you will.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Yes, Ralph?
Well, I echo both your thoughts. I think to some degree what we can do and have to do is to say to her, what is the ultimate top line going to look like and what is acceptable? If it's 100 classrooms times whatever the number is, and it gets to be over $1 million, I think there should be some recognition that that would be very hard to get through, given the fact that we can't afford a lot of the things we'd like to have. So in a way, she needs to have a budgetary item for the ultimate top line cost if all the classrooms were equipped with this equipment. So I would suggest the best we can do is to say, here's the top line number that's likely to be affordable in the next couple of years. I think that's a good way to look at it. And then more broadly, what really does concern me most about all of this is that there was in one of those recommended, what I call them, support documents for this technology. The words were used, they were not teaching kids the what, we're teaching them the how. I don't know if you remember seeing those words. What it really says is that we're not asking people to really know anything, we're just teaching them how to get at things. Well, most of us by now have figured out that by getting at things, we use Google or we use Bing or we use something of the sort. And in a way, what we're doing is we're diminishing the essential prerequisite for knowledge, which is knowing something, okay? And I do feel that these technologies are an extension of just having a computer at home or a Surface machine and having, touch screens and so on. But we haven't really heard about what are the applications that really make a difference here. And so it isn't that I don't want her to succeed or to use them or anything else. I just wonder how deeply they've looked at the fundamental philosophical questions about this whole thing. And then the top line question is what will actually be affordable in the next couple of years? So that's about all I can say. I will say, on the other hand, I know they're going to do this one way or the other. Whatever we say, I don't think this is going to make a difference. But at least we can say, top line, we don't think more than this could be affordable. And there are some really good, important philosophical questions as to the extent to which this should be used in replacement for real learning and knowledge. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Can someone remind me how long this pilot program was intended to run?
That's a good question.
A year.
I don't recall seeing the specifics on that.
I thought she had actually said she wanted to do this between March of this year. I mean, I don't know how that was going to work because we haven't appropriated the money, but between March of this year and the end of the school semester. That was I think, but I could be wrong on having read it that way.
I got the same reaction, Ralph, that she wanted to slam this in there and get it going right away, so that next year they could come back and decide whether it was any good or not.
Yeah.
That's the feeling I got, but I don't know. I sort of feel that there's a potential to obligate a huge amount of money here on something that's really experimental, and what's it going to really do for the students?
Well, I think that's why it's a pilot program, is to find out whether or not it does benefit the students. We don't have to go forward with funding the rest of the classrooms if this doesn't work out. So we're making kind of an investment in an experiment. We may find out either is a disaster or extremely good for our students going forward. And then if that's the problem, I guess that's a good problem to have, and find a way to fund it. We have to stay competitive as a school district. If this is the way kids are going to be taught going forward, we have to give credence to it.
Anybody? Brian, you have any thoughts? You got to unmute yourself.
That was just karma telling me not to speak. I have a handful of thoughts. First, I do echo what Susan just said about this being a pilot, and that we should be trialing things and learning things, and seeing what works and what doesn't. I also echo some of the points that others have made that I do struggle to, to at least foresee how some of this technology is actually going to materially improve the learning outcomes. It just, to some degree, a lot of it's special effects instead of, focusing on the transfer of content and knowledge. And so I am a little bit concerned that, we could get swept up in the hysteria of, what we perceive other districts to be doing and defaulting to that being the standard when, that may or may not help learning at all. But I'm open to doing the pilot. I do choke on the idea of spending $12,000 per classroom, which is $1 million, $1 million plus, for technology that will absolutely be obsolete in whatever 5 to 7 years. So this is not a one-time item, and this number basically eclipses the size of the total townwide digital infrastructure project that that we did largely at the behest of the schools half a decade ago, right? I mean, we rolled a townwide fiber network, 2 data centers, all of the school infrastructure, all the town infrastructure, and the devices for less than the cost of upgrading these classrooms. So this number seems big to me, and I feel like we may be getting carried away with the peripherals as opposed to the core of this, which is really the interactive screen. And that's what's driving the cost up here. If you're really just talking about a short throw projector with the interactive peripherals, it's a fraction of that. And my instinct is that's probably where we're going to land after we test all this stuff and figure out that some of it is kind of neat, but it's the equivalent of sort of $2,000 walkie-talkies. I mean, those are kind of my key thoughts. I mean, I do think we need to look at this as a pilot and not a commitment to fund the rest of the stuff, because I'm not even sure where this would fit in the budget if they came back and actually asked to roll the entire district on this technology next year. The other thing I can tell you is, I've got a child in high school, not in district, but in high school. They don't use any of this stuff, nor have any desire to. So it's
Francine,
causing me
you have any
pause. Sorry?
thoughts? Are you finished?
Yep.
Francine, do you have any thoughts?
Nothing new to what's already been talked about by the rest of the folks. I mean, I've got mixed feelings because I do have 3 kids in the Cohasset public school system, in as low as Deer Hill at this point. So I've got mixed feelings about it. I like the idea of a pilot program. I personally, and I like Brian said, I'm not an educator, or Michael, some of the folks, I'm not an educator myself, but I just can't picture what the benefit would be at the lower level, having been in the classroom and volunteering and seeing what they do throughout the day, how that's really going to be impactful for all those classrooms at those ages. But I could be wrong. Like I said, or Susan, you had brought up about what the time frame is here. I honestly think this school year is a lost cause at this point. So any piloting they do from now until June, I wouldn't know. I don't know how you can measure any of it, because they're still in a hybrid situation, hybrid classrooms. Some of the schools, and I know they'll go full time in April, God willing. But so I'm not sure any pilot testing this year is really going to tell them a whole lot. But I wonder if they won't do it themselves, if we come up with some sort of criteria that they need to be able to respond to, if we go ahead and approve this and the other committees approve this, that in order to come back, we set the parameters as to what would be successful. If they're not willing to do that, to give that information to us, like we set the bar. We need to know this, this, and this before and after. And only then, and we can see, how the improvements, and only then would we consider a full rollout. So random thoughts, but not anything new to what other folks have said.
Any other thoughts? No? Okay. It sounds.
Sam, hi, I was on mute. I want to support your point that we have to give them a number that they have to live within. And then it's up to the school department to make their own choices on how they're going to use that allocation, rather than our voting a pilot up or down. So that might be a question for us to pursue further.
What kind of number are you thinking about? Right now, they're asking roughly 64,000 for the pilots.
I would first start with the amount of money we have to allocate from the capital, the annual capital stabilization, and then make some rough estimates of how much we're going to allocate to each town department. And yes, we can go back and look at which spends might be much more important and give a little bit more money, not a little bit, give more money to a group that has made a stronger case for what it is that they need urgently, or with a high priority. But I think the way that I would go about solving this is to give everybody an allocation and say, okay, here's what we can give you. What can you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, and the classic way that you've been doing it is you've got to go through every line item and sort of vote on it in terms of how we would prioritize it. I would rather let each department make their own choices, which you've tried to make them do. But if they know they've got a fixed amount of money, how do they want to spend it, then it's on them. And then in a second go round, they can try and make their case for getting more money and taking it away from somebody else.
Well, the school's total for all their requests is about just shy of 2.4 million.
Mm-hmm.
And if you funded all their requests, I don't think we might be able to do it, but we wouldn't have any money in reserve. I think we're going to have about 3.4 million of requests, and the amount we have, and I'm still trying to figure, I'm a little confused from what Don's given me, but we might have a total of 4 million total available, assuming we get the 750,000 that he has marked that hasn't been voted yet. So he has 2 million in the budget, 750 additional. So that, and we're going in with about 1 million. So that gives us about 3.7 million of available, but we don't want to spend everything.
So first thing,
I think we want
first
to
thing,
hold things in reserve for emergency.
so that should be the first slice out of that total, is how much are we going to hold in reserve, and make that part of the ground rules.
Well, we've traditionally held 1 million in reserve, or close to it. You know, it might be 800,000, it might be 900,000, but we sort of target 1 million, depending on what's being requested.
So if we start with And I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the number that we're starting with. Is it 4.0 that we're starting with?
Yeah, I'd use 4 million even to start with.
Why don't we say, I'm just going to put ideas out. Why don't we say that we're going to set aside 900,000 in reserve? So we're not going to hold our normal full million because we see how much demand there is. We're going to hold back 900,000, which we think is a prudent number. And that leaves us 3.1 million to divide. Now we can say as a ground rule, okay, the schools typically get 70% of the, I forget which chunk of money it is, but is it the new funding? They typically get 70% and the rest of the town gets 30.
No, it's usually 6139 it used to be.
39.
Yeah, 6139.
So we take that 3.1 and we give 60% of that to the schools and 40% to the other groups. So 60% of the 3.1 million is what?
1.8.
Okay, then that's what we say. This is what we can give you. Make your choice.
Can I play devil's advocate for a minute,
Please,
Michael?
yeah.
Yes.
This is
So-
a pure, thought exercise here.
So I'm wondering if it's that simple to do without actually going in and looking at all the requests, because my fear is if some of the requests from other departments that don't get that bigger piece of it, so non-school departments, if what they're asking for is a critical item or a life safety item or a contractual item that we really can't say no to, but we're taking more money and putting it to schools, then I think we could have, I just think it could be a little bit of a problem just doing it so simply that way without actually taking into consideration all of the requests and what might be a priority for one of those reasons, like I said, life safety or contractual or.
I absolutely agree. And so in this thought exercise, maybe before we say schools, you're going to take 70% of 3.1, we go through and we decide which of all the requests we have been convinced are absolutely essential and approve them and put them to one side.
Okay.
And then see how much is left for fungible.
Okay.
I
Now,
agree
again,
with
this
that
is just
approach.
ideas and I'm not
Yeah.
pushing one way or the other. I'm just trying to sort of
Yeah. no.
figure something out with everybody.
So
What we
if I
want,
could interject a few thoughts. Michael, I think it's an interesting exercise that you're proposing. I'm not sure that with 2 weeks to go in this budgeting cycle, now is the time for us to recreate the wheel in terms of how we approach this. But it is something that, perhaps, we should keep in our minds as we go through this. And certainly something that we should perhaps revisit and focus on after this cycle. Immediately after this cycle, and long before anyone even starts thinking about the next cycle. There are a few problems that I foresee if we give departments allocations. The first is that some of the departments have long periods of boredom followed by moments of large capital needs. Fire, for example, typically we see $50,000 or $75,000 worth of requests from them. And then, every so often they need either a $300,000 ambulance or a $600,000 pumper, right? So we can't just say, fire, your annual budget is $300,000, because then they'll go spend it on a bunch of stuff they don't need, and we won't have, and then they can't cover the pumper when they need it, right? So we do need to maintain the flexibility to move priorities between departments in any given year based on what really needs to happen that year. The second thing I'd say is that I do think we need to sort of focus on the schools number. It has been brought to my attention that perhaps, relative to the 60 whatever percent split that the schools get of the the operating budget, that they're not seeing a similar number of capital. I think we need to hear that, think about it, and really think long and hard about it. Because it's not quite that simple. I mean, we've got massive school facilities that historically have carried a lot of debt. And the school is a beneficiary of virtually all of the other departments. I mean, they get free water. If there's a security issue, our police force descends upon it. If there's a fire, the fire department has to put out the fire. When DPW asks for a sidewalk snow blower, the reason they give us is that the schools can't open unless they clear the sidewalks, right? So every other department in town is providing services to the schools. So I don't think it's quite as simple as, just saying, hey, let's pick 60% and stick it in the school bucket, because there's a lot more complexity to it than that. That's all I'd say. And I don't really think that in the case of the next 1 to 2 meetings that we have to figure out this year's appropriations, we should be trying to crack that nut.
Okay.
Can I throw in the previous years, we've tried to use some sort of prioritization. I was trying to find what we had done last year. I can't find the exact matrix we used, but we had things like, there were essential projects, there were priority ones, there's efficiency, the state of good repair. I mean, there were a series of descriptions of things that unequivocally we were going to do, then other things that were more optional. In a way, it was a way of trying to come up with some systematic way of looking at all of the projects in that context. I don't know, I think, Brian, you had modified the original one, and I don't have your original or your changed one. But I believe you had actually modified it, then modified it again, so that we had some way of prioritizing based on our best judgment about where these projects fit within those sets of descriptions that we had.
Yeah, I have a copy of it.
It's needed.
Trying to
It's
look
good.
it up now. I don't think we ever came to a final conclusion on what the best way to prioritize town-wide was. I mean, if somebody feels we did settle on one sort of method, I'd be happy to try to look at it.
Right.
But I'm trying to find. We had a couple of different matrices.
Yeah.
The last one I have is dated July 22nd, 2019, and it went in and broke every project down by the risk that the project would mitigate to the public, the source of the funding, the cash paybacks, the impact on service levels, and the social and/or economic impact. And then it ranked each of these, and we came up with a point total. We can certainly do that on these if everybody thinks it's worthwhile. I'm open to it. It might help us view things from a town-wide perspective,
Mhm.
rather than trying to say that one department's more important than the other. I mean, it's going to be more work, but it's probably going to give us more benefits in the long run. So I'll throw that out there and see how you all feel about going through that.
I support that. It's systematic, it's defensible, and it's thoughtful.
Originally, this came from what was known as the Trent Hills capital project prioritization matrix. That's where it all came from. We
Yep.
threw out we started with that, and then we whittled it down a lot, as I remember. But there were some very fundamental things about it that I thought we may be missing again unless we actually sort of take a look at that whole thing and say which one of these two systems, the Trent Hills one, which we tried and maybe didn't finish, and then the one that you had of July 22nd, 2019, Sam, which seems a little bit thin. Because I'm looking at the Trent Hills one now, and it had first project category. It talked about, is the project essential? Is it a priority? Is it the project there because of efficiency or cost savings? Is it there because of state of a good repair, the need to repair things, or is it an improvement? And then that was a very helpful way to look at things. And then it went on to say things like, did it align with the strategy of for example, the school systems, for example, to improve things? And how did it impact the budget? And then finally, did it work and did it help consolidate services and improve overall efficiency? And there were a series of very, very well thought out ways to look at it. Although that's a lot of stuff, and I think we did not accept it all. And all of those categories were ranked according to a percentage or what would I call it? I guess it was called a assignment of value or a what do I call it? A weighting factor, usually a percentage. I don't know which one to use, but we do need something. I think we need something some systematic, and it does require discipline. That's all I can say.
Well, should we give it a try?
So look, a year ago, we looked at Trent Hills and we looked at a couple of others, and we came up with a very simplified alternative to it that removed a bunch of the redundancy and tried to make it a little bit more cut and dry in terms of the prioritization. And, we finalized that. We can dust it off. We can find it and dust it off and apply it to these requests. I think to some degree you'll see that it was built into the request forms, and departments have already done it in certain cases. But yeah, happy to give it a try. I don't think we should recreate our weightings because we spent 2 or 3 meetings on this last year.
Well, why don't I send out I can send out the latest one. That's probably where we ended up is my guess. And we can run through the various projects and see what we come up with. It's going to be a fair amount of work because you have to take each project and run it through the grid, so to speak.
Correct.
But it may help us rank them a little bit better.
It's
And in fact, I think we took our matrix and ran the projects through it last year.
Yeah,
I remember that too. Or at least we tested a few of them.
We certainly tested it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you tested it, looking back, was it worth it? It seems like it ought to be, but looking back on it, was it a good idea?
Ultimately, the methodology attempts to remove subjectivity from it, but it's impossible to do so, right? Some people look at the scoring system and sort of adjust how they're rating things depending on the outcome they want. But it's certainly a methodology to put everything on the same playing field.
I think some were clear though, Brian, right? I mean, some
Yes, they were.
Not subjective, like some of the safety equipment that the police department was asking for was clearly
Right.
to be a priority. There's no opinion really based on what was presented. But otherwise, I would agree it becomes subjective at some level once you get through those ones that are very clear.
The interesting observation, it largely confirmed things that we were doing instinctively anyway, which is, public safety, the non-negotiables of public safety are exactly that. And then the things that present, the things that actually present danger to us, such as sprinkler heads in the school system, fall into a similar category, right? And then things become a little bit more, a little bit more of a sequencing after that.
Well, I mean, clearly something like the sprinkler heads in the school system almost become mandatory.
And that's why they're high on the school's
It's
list.
a life safety
Yeah.
issue.
Right. And the buses are at the top of their list because it's a mandate. We have to provide busing services.
Yeah.
So I think one way to look at this is there are some of these which are essential. You can just say, these are the ones, just check them off. Don't even worry about them. Take a look at the ones that have some question as their prioritization. You don't have to look at everyone. It's just what you're saying. I'm looking at the list. You're going to do a bus lease. You're going to do the Osgood sprinkler heads. You're going to do the Deer Hill School air handlers. You're going to do the, I guess what, well, there may be some questions here about some of it. Oddly enough, the wood shop, or maybe not the wood shop, but maybe a question about the science lab. But there are the ones you can name, right? Just name them. Say those are good. You're going to do them, right? And then leave the other ones with some questions, and then you only deal with those, right?
Well, I mean, clearly, we're probably going to do the police cars. We'll probably do all the fire requests.
Yeah, right.
After that, it starts to get more, and you do the sprinkler heads and the air handlers, and probably the wood shop dust collection. I'd put ahead of the track and turf replacement, even though the schools don't.
I agree with you. Yeah. So you can make those judgments almost very easily, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So salt shed and mowers.
I was actually surprised that the science classroom is below
I am too.
some of the other items.
Yeah.
Because that's been going on for a while now, and it looks like they finally put their mind to coming up with a real solution. So I was surprised that it came out at 7.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree.
Well, can we go through the list and sort of tick off what we don't need to do a townwide prioritization for, because we're going to do it anyway?
Yeah, sure. Of course.
I think that's exactly what we should do, Sam. I think most of this stuff is obvious.
Mhm.
Well, you're gonna do the police, because we've committed to a vehicle replacement program with them.
All right, that's a check off. Okay.
Yeah. You're gonna do the fire. The only one in question might be the command vehicle hybrid. But they're rotating their vehicles through, so it probably makes sense to do all of those.
You could easily put that one into a second category. We'll take a look at that one when we've gotten through with everything else, Sam. So you could say that only the command vehicle would be of a question.
Yeah.
Just because the other two seem to be no-brainers.
In the schools, you're gonna do the bus leads, the sprinkler heads, the air handler, the wood shop dust collection, the plumbing.
What plumbing is that now?
That's the science lab.
Science lab. Okay, is that a no-brainer for everybody? I wonder. Is it?
Well, I mean, Susan, suggested that we've looked at this a number of times and it's time to do it. Because it could be presenting a safety hazard there. The bus parking lot, they can't even make up their minds where they want it yet.
Well, let's go back up to the other two at the top of their list. You got track replacement and turf replacement.
They're not in the order.
Yeah, the CPC, I'm trying to find out how much CPC might give them for the track. They have requested money from CPC.
Right.
You know the answer to that, Michelle?
I do. I believe CPC gave them $360,000 or $375 for that line item.
Well, that knocks And for some reason, CPC can't do anything on the turf.
Right.
It's
So-
very unclear to me why, but
It's excluded from CPC funding.
I know, but you can do a track, but you can't do turf. I know.
Let me ask a question about this. If you do the track, do you absolutely have to do the turf?
You probably could delay it a year.
How would you get the question has always been access over a new track to get to the field, right? That's
No,
not the issue.
you'll probably ruin whatever part of the track you have to go over to replace the turf field.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to do the turf field first.
So the problem with that thinking now is that the linkage is a problem. And the linkage says that apparently the track is more troublesome than the turf field itself. So that 10 years from now, we're going to find that the track itself has got trouble. We will have put in a new turf field, and it won't be in trouble at all because the technology is improved and the grass is perfectly good, but you're going to be forced to do it so that track and turf ultimately get combined when they don't need to be. That's a really big sort of problem with this kind of system, that we're locked into doing turf when you're doing track, so.
Ralph, I'm not sure that's true. I think it's the other way around. The issue is, if the turf outlasts the track, it's easy to replace the track without replacing the turf.
That's
Because the
correct.
track's on the perimeter.
That's correct. But
The
they're
bigger
taking-
problem is if the turf wears out and the track continues on. But they do have, to be clear, you can do these at different times. They do have basically, call it a bridge, okay, that they're able to put over a track to get equipment up and over the track without damaging it and replace a field if you want to do that. You can do that. People do that. It adds an extra layer of complexity and logistics, but it absolutely can and is done regularly.
That makes the decision easier. But the problem I raised to you is that it doesn't matter whether they are not synced. It is that question of, if you can do the turf field separately, then you have the ability to actually take advantage of its life, which is desirable. That's the point.
You will. In this case, we extended the life of the track to line up with the end of life for the field, and we're basically at an end of life for both right now. I mean, that was the whole point of it. The investment in the resurfacing of the track a few years back was to, buy whatever it was, 2 or 3 more years until it was time to replace the field at the same time. And Sam, I know you reviewed the field with an outside expert, and my understanding is it's time to replace the field. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's significantly deteriorated.
Okay.
The plastic grass leaves, if I can call them that, I'm not sure that's the right name, but they're starting to just break off. And one of my concerns about the turf field is that we may have to replace this every 10 to 12 years automatically because it's going to wear out. And if that's the case, shouldn't we have some kind of a sinking fund that plunks into it? I mean, they charge fees for people to use the field, not a lot, but if that were segregated into a sinking fund, then it would be available for replacement when the time comes. So that's sort of where my thought process is right now.
It feels to me that it's time to do both. I don't see any benefit in not doing both at this moment in time, especially given CPC is, stepping up for 375 of the track.
Yeah.
I don't see a benefit to separating them at this point after we, basically worked to align them and do it all in one shot. I don't know if we need to spend more time on the track and field, but just looking at the spreadsheet, Sam, the issue I have with the spreadsheet as you have it, and as a result of the course of this discussion, is that the spreadsheet does not reflect the school's prioritization of their requests. And, we do have a prioritization of the school's requests. And I think that, we should be looking at their requests in that order, because I think they actually make perfect sense. They've effectively taken the prioritization criteria that we've given them and applied them to their requests.
Right.
And I'm just, hold on a second. I just pulled up school prioritization list from OneDrive. I don't know how I got there. I just searched for it and it came up. But I'm looking at it and it's exactly as one would expect. Let me just back out of it and search. Sorry?
The only thing that changed from their initial prioritization was that they had the track and the turf field
Separately.
ranked.
Yeah.
And then they moved it up to 3A. So I stuck it in there.
Right.
I'm
Right
not
after
sure-
right after the rooftop handlers, because I think their
Yep.
feeling is that, it's end of life
Yep.
and it needs,
That's coming from them.
right.
I mean, I would tend to think the Chromebook lease might be more important, but from an educational standpoint. But that's me, and I'm,
My guess is you could get another year out of the Chromebooks if you absolutely had to. But you're probably right. So say it's 4A, it still should be above the the dust collection system in the wood shop. I think we'd probably all agree with that.
well, I'm not so sure if you need a new dust collection system in the wood shop, isn't that a health
Of course,
issue, health and
Of course.
safety issue?
of course it is. You have to have that. I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Of course, it's a higher priority. It doesn't make any sense at all.
You think it's higher priority than a
Then turf replacements, for heaven's sakes. And
All right.
well,
track
I mean, if you
replacements.
didn't have one or the other, you'd have to cancel
Hold
one,
on.
right?
No, but the reality is that you cannot have a system where, in fact, kids can inhale dust. I mean, for heaven's
Right.
sakes, it's an OSHA problem. This is one of the ones. This is a no
Right.
brainer.
Well,
Can we
so
please
Ralph,
go
I'm in
back to
violent
no
agreement
brainer?
with you on the OSHA, but
Yeah.
my point is you also can't have a turf that fails impact testing
It
and have
doesn't
kids
fail it.
tackling each other on it.
Listen, guys, it doesn't fail it. We looked at all of those numbers. It doesn't fail impact testing. And I think this idea that you're losing a couple of shreds of green is just ridiculous. If you've walked it, that is really not true. So
Right.
this is really a thing where I don't say not do it. I'm saying the prioritization is completely fouled up here on their list. I'm looking at their list, right?
Okay, so let's go through their list.
Hold on, could we hold, please?
Sure.
I want to go back to where we started, which is no-brainers. If we can just get those identified
That's good. Yeah.
and put in one bucket, then we can go back. And we haven't looked at the DPW no-brainers.
Okay.
So this is what I think I heard on schools as no-brainers. And correct me anywhere. The bus lease, the DHS handlers, air handlers, the Osgood
Sprinkler heads.
sprinkler heads, the wood shop dust collection we said was a no-brainer.
Yep.
Science lab plumbing we said was a no-brainer. And
Yep.
that's all I have so far.
You need the CMHS HVAC system as well.
Okay, so let me move that over.
The what, Brian?
The middle high school HVAC system, which is also the air handlers, the rooftop air handlers.
All right, that brings us to 1.033 million for the schools. At this point, the no-brainers are just above 1 million. Facilities, the Ram truck, is that a no-brainer or move on?
Well, you're going to have to replace their vehicle eventually, so
All right, but would you call it a no-brainer at this point, Sam, in our process?
it's okay.
So leave it, right?
Yeah.
No-brainer. All right. DPW, the skid steer,
We already bought it.
We already
Oh.
bought it.
We already
So
bought it.
we own it. Yeah.
okay, so all over it goes. The bucket truck, no-brainer or not?
I'd say no, we've gone years without one.
Right.
Okay, chipper, no-brainer or not?
What was the one, Mike?
Chipper,
They've got a chipper and they put it at the next to the lowest in their own priority. So I don't think they think it's an absolute priority at this time.
good
So-
point.
yeah.
Slope mower,
Did you make the salt shed a must-do?
I haven't gotten there, but we can jump to the salt shed.
Well, that was their first priority.
Okay, and is that number still 500?
Yeah,
or
I
did
thought
it go
that price
down?
went down.
Well, it depends what they do.
Well, Brian suggested a smaller size shed, and I thought the number was 400. Michelle, am I right?
3 something.
Yes, so he suggested 2 different types of sheds. If you want the wood shed, and I don't have it in front of me, so I may be misstating the two, but if you want the wood shed, I believe it shakes out in the 400 category. If you want to do the canvas, it's in the 300s. So we updated the capital spreadsheet to say 425 to account for contingency and not really knowing which model they were going with, even though I believe they're leaning towards the canvas option.
Okay. So do we feel that's a no-brainer?
Well, the existing shed is starting to fall apart.
Agreed.
So something has to be done, and we ought to do it properly. I've asked Brian Joyce for a figure on salt usage from the last several years, but I haven't gotten any answer from him. But
Right.
that's kind of nothing new.
Let me make a couple of comments here. This is not a cost issue. In other words, we're not going to save any money of any significant amount by having a 3,000 ton versus a 400 ton salt shed. It doesn't really make any difference these days. It only made difference in 2015 when salt and sand became very expensive and people were taking advantage of the fact that so much was being used. So we're not going to say there's no cost benefit here. This whole argument has to be about whether the old one is sufficiently deteriorated that in fact it cannot be used. Remember, we've used it for 30 years without difficulty. But
Yep.
the question is only, is it in fact so deteriorated and it's incapable of being repaired that you have to replace the thing? And if you do replace it, you don't have anywhere to put the new one, which means you're going to have to do something about spending money somewhere, whether it's Crocker Lane or somewhere else, was another 200,000. So this is not a sole standalone $400,000 expense. It's 400,000 plus at least the amount to put in or buy and then pave and then light and then secure an entirely new facility. I mean, that's what it is. So you're not asking yourself about just, you're asking really 2 questions. What's the real total cost of this thing? And number 2 is the current one in such terrible shape that it cannot be repaired? So
Okay, so the jury's out on that.
I would say so. My goodness.
Okay.
Michelle?
Yeah,
Fair
so, so Ralph, I think they've come around and they're no longer looking at Crocker Lane for the salt shed. I believe what they came up with was they would take down the existing salt shed and this would go in the same footprint as the existing salt shed now. So I think the cost is just the cost,
Okay.
to the best of my knowledge, but we
Okay.
can definitely check on that.
I think you should check. The problem with the current location, I remember him saying, is that it was probably almost oversized for that space, but I don't know if that's still true. So,
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll check on that.
Okay, so it's off the no-brainer list for now. That's all we're doing is we're trying to pick off the no-brainers and see where we land. So following DPW, we have the police 2 SUV, 122.5. We agreed that's no-brainer, correct?
The which one?
the police SUVs, yeah.
2 SUVs. for
Well, we've made a
120.
commitment to
Okay.
rotate their
So
fleet.
that makes the no-brainer list, right?
Yeah,
Then for fire, we are calling no-brainer engine 2 repair and the rescue jack equipment.
Yeah.
We have left the command vehicle hybrid off the no-brainer list for now.
Yeah.
The last thing we haven't applied no-brainer to is rec. Sawyer Street Courts, Milliken Concession, and Beechwood Courts. Do we have any there that we feel is a no-brainer? Yes.
well, rec has also gone to CPC for funding on these items.
Mhm.
But I don't know what CPC, I think they're hearing them tonight. And so I don't know what CPC is going to decide.
All right.
Yes, Michelle?
So CPC awarded recreation $15,000 for Milliken and $12,000 plus a contingency for Sawyer Street basketball courts.
So Michelle,
Basketball courts,
Yep, Beechwood.
ones.
so that's in
On
addition,
Sawyer Street, I'm sorry.
that's in addition to what the CPC had already put aside
Correct.
for these projects?
Yes.
So would you just repeat that one more time? How much for Sawyer and how much for?
So Milliken, an additional 12,000 and, sorry, Milliken, an additional 15,000, Sawyer Street, an additional 12,000.
Okay.
So,
So if I take the 15,000 away from what Milliken had, we come to 98,000.
And
if I
nothing for
take-
Beechwood.
They didn't give anything towards Beechwood, but for Milliken, I would honestly say, I don't know how much they would actually need from capital at this point, if anything, based on us shrinking the footprint of the entire building that's going to go there. If anything, it would be $25,000, $30,000.
And 15,000 allocated already.
Correct.
Plus, I recall there's a pretty healthy contingency in
Yeah.
these numbers.
But
Yes.
Rec is requesting 113,000 for
Yeah.
Milliken.
So that was because the original building that we spec'd out was oversized. And we decided to shrink the entire building down and go with a basic necessity instead of something that's overbuilt, essentially. And the price came down significantly. So therefore, the request has come down significantly.
So do you know what the price,
Well, what
you know
is
what the
the
price of that new
request?
building is?
Sorry,
So
Susan, go ahead.
Well, I know the other building was 229,000, the last quote. So where are we now?
So we're about $180,000 right now for this building. And if you add in the money to do the water, sewer, electrical, that brings us at about $230,000. They have $213,000 already,
Right.
plus the money they just received. So it's cutting it a little close. But
So how
Okay,
much do they really need?
Exactly.
I would say honestly, so they didn't have to come back again, I would say $30,000.
In
Okay.
total, including what CPC is going to give them.
Correct.
So is
really,
that a
the
no-brainer
request-
because they've got funding for nearly the entire project?
They
So-
do. And this would just be funding to get them over the hump in the event that bids came back a little higher than we thought, based on the state of the economy right now.
Right, because you just said it was 230 less. The 210 they already have is only 20,000, but you're saying goose it up to 34.
I would, just for a buffer. We're hearing weekly, steel prices went up 8%, wood prices went up 15%. We're just worried that when it finally comes back, if we don't have the funding in place, we can't award the bid.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so,
really, all they're going to ask for us as a maximum would be about 15,000.
I
I
think
would
30.
I just said 30.
30, maximum $30,000.
Oh, so does that include the 15 from CPC? No.
It's on top of the 15 from CPC.
Okay.
So do we consider that a no-brainer, given that the concession has just about 90% of its funding, and we'd be standing in the way of that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd consider any of them a no-brainer.
Okay, then leave them off the
You know,
discussion.
they're-
Really?
Michelle, if you can give me screen share, I'll put up the spreadsheet with the numbers I've been plugging in, so we could all look at it.
So Milliken goes to 30. What does Sawyer go to in terms of our request?
13.
Our request would be 13.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's 25,000 minus 12,000?
Yes,
Okay, and Beechwood stays at 70,000.
correct. Beechwood's unchanged. There was no funding from CPC. Mike, I think you should have the ability now. Oh, there you go.
So folks, here's what I've done. I've just moved the amounts over to this column F, and I put in some totals here. And wherever you see the totals, I've grouped them together down at a bottom line. So our no-brainers are 1.269 at the moment. That's where we stand. And we're looking at 3.1 million.
We have Chief Sylvia, and he has his hand up.
Yes, Chief, you.
Good evening, everyone. I know that you're looking at the hybrid vehicle, and I just want to remind the committee that that was pushed off from last year to this year. The vehicle is now 12 years old, and in the last year, I've had to replace the transmission, motor mounts, and everything else. The car has served its useful life. It is dying an inglorious death at the fire department. And the only question was whether or not we went for a hybrid vehicle or a regular gas vehicle.
Yeah,
And the argument was that we're going to keep this car, hopefully, for another 12 years once we replace it. That's the plan for these vehicles, one every 6 years or one every 12 years. So the bottom line is that I just didn't want the committee to lose sight of the fact that that was originally scheduled for last year, and we decided we would try and push it off because we had to spend the money on the ambulance, which we did. And now the car is a year older than it was, and to wait for it to be 13 years old and to have it just completely collapse may be a problem that you might want to consider. That's all. That just was a quick comment. I'm sorry I interrupted.
I'm glad you
no,
did.
don't be sorry. We're happy to hear from you. Mike, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the spreadsheet that you put up, you don't have the bus lease or the Osgood sprinkler heads on there. At least I don't see.
I'm sorry. They are here. I didn't scroll up enough.
Oh, you had hidden them up top. On
Yes,
the-
I did. So good catch, but we're good. Let me see where else I can save some.
Okay, there are a couple of things I think we can take off this list entirely, which might remove some clutter. Just as people pause here, I believe the Deer Hill School clocks have been resolved. Is that not the case?
They have been resolved.
Okay, so let's just take them off the list. They're not a current request. The Osgood wall pads are also not on the school request list, as best I can tell this year.
Okay.
I do show them on the most recent list, Brian.
The SAM circulated, but they're not on the schools list.
Okay.
And I thought we funded those last year.
We did fund some. These were additional ones. They're not on the school's priority list, but they were on the list. They didn't make it into the top priorities.
Okay, well, we'll scratch
Okay,
it.
interesting.
Okay.
Let me ask about a couple on the school list. How about the water station bottles? That's not a no-brainer, or it is a no-brainer?
Those have all been done.
I thought those were done. I thought we did those like off cycle with COVID money or last fall or somewhere.
We did. Those are done.
Ron?
Okay, let's take those off the list.
Brian, I don't think we did all of them.
That's what I remember, right?
Me too.
But
You may be right.
How critical that is.
Yeah, I recall that there were still a couple that had to be done. We did do some last year.
Okay. So leave them on the list, right?
But again, they're not in their top priorities. They originally came to us with 19 items and only are showing 12 priorities plus the track and turf at the bottom, so 14. So there are 5 of them that aren't on the priority list.
All of the water stations that they were asking for funding for this year have been completed.
That's what I thought.
They have them.
Okay,
That's not to say that they're all replaced, but the ones they're asking for this year have been done.
Okay.
Okay, so we can take water off the list.
Yep.
Did you take document cameras off the list?
We'll right now for you.
I don't think they had that on their priority list.
No, they're not. They have 12 items on their priority list. Well, actually, sorry, more, but
Yep.
because they've got a tie for third place and plus a 3A.
Mhm.
I guess they've got 14 items on their list.
Oh, right now we're at 1.033 out of 3.1 million.
Yeah, Mike, can you move up again on your, so we can see the whole list for schools?
Sure, sorry.
Thanks.
There we go.
Okay.
So did we decide that the salt shed wasn't necessary?
Actually, sorry, go on, Sam.
All we've done so far is put our no-brainer list together. And now we're ready to continue on with items that are not no-brainer, but open for debate.
Okay,
And Chief
Let me-
Sylvia just made a very strong case for his command vehicle.
right. Before we get into the
Sure.
before we get into debating ordering them, let's make sure we've got our numbers right. So the school track replacement at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, has 375 coming out of CPC, which means the ask to us is not 495, it's 120. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Other changes? Okay. So why don't we take up Chief Sylvia's command vehicle?
Before we do that, Michael, what are the total requests? Now that we've eliminated a bunch of things and changed a bunch of numbers, what are the total requests as they stand now?
Give me a second, I'll pull that together for you. Total requests, including the ones that we have already called no-brainers, yeah?
Just total requests. Just forget about the no-brainers for a second. Total requests.
Okay.
You have it down the bottom at,
Those are no-brainers.
100.
Hold on. Yeah, I'm messing this up. Give me a moment.
And what, Michelle, while Michael's doing that, let's just make sure that we don't lose track of some other things. So the boat ramp is off the list, right? Because that's not being funded by capital.
Correct.
Okay.
We don't have a
And
request for the boat ramp.
sorry,
We don't have a request for the boat ramp.
correct. It's also
Yeah.
being funded not by capital, so we're good both ways. And in terms of Lori's new office or replacement at the Harbor Master Building, that's also off the request list. Is that correct? It's just-
Correct. We pushed that out to next year.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not losing big chunky items. What else is I'm trying to think what else used to be on this list that's not here.
There was something from the harbor master for cement, for the cement docks, I believe, for $35,000. That should come off as well.
Okay,
That
so
was
that's not
funded
on
by
our list
CPC.
currently. All right.
Michael, is the total under schools still including the ones that are crossed out?
Good catch. Let me get those out of there. There they are. So this is the schools, this whole column minus these three cells. 2.291. And plus one more here.
That doesn't seem right.
Okay.
Because
what's off?
before we did anything from my original list, I had 2,371,000. And this says we've only taken like 80,000 out of it. And I think we've taken more out of it.
The 80,000 we've taken out is 20 plus 23 plus 30.
We also reduced the track
Yes, we reduced the track.
by 375.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we reduced the salt shed to 425. And we reduced the Sawyer Street courts by 12,000.
Right.
We reduced Milliken concession all the way down to 30.
You reduced it by 80,000.
Right.
No, you reduced it by 80,000, Mike.
Yep.
Don't change it to 80. It's supposed to be 30.
Thank you. How's that? Good?
Much better.
All right. So now our total requests are 3.3.
Yep.
Mhm.
And we've got about 3 to spend, basically. If you want to cap this, if you want to hold a line at $1 million.
Mhm.
900,000 is what I was figuring.
I understood. We usually get pushed to do that, but it's our fallback as opposed to our starting point.
Okay, so
I mean, shoot for $1 million and we'll see where we come out.
Shoot for $1 million.
You know,
okay,
and
so
if it's
funding
something
is going to
that
be
looks particularly good, we can add it back in.
is 4 million minus 1 million. So there's our funding at 3 million, 4 minus 1.
Right.
And our no-brainers at the moment are standing at 1.3 and leaving us with about 1.7 to allocate.
Okay.
Everyone,
So we can do one of two things next. Okay, we can either go through all the other appropriations, or we can look at some of the stuff that is likely to get pushed out and or not funded in this cycle to get from 3.3 down to 3. I'm okay to do it either way. But I just mentioned that because I think there's pretty much broad consensus that no one really knows what we're going to do in terms of a school bus parking lot. And it's a $200,000 number.
Yeah, but they can't figure out where they want it, Brian. So,
And my point is, if we know we're taking that off the list, let's just take it off the list and then figure out where the other 100,000 has to come from.
yeah,
Well, wouldn't the other 100,000 you guys talked about earlier, at a minimum, the high school sidewalks and curbs, if you're gonna do the turf, if the turf and the track are going to be something considered this year, wherever the funding might come from, you don't want to do the sidewalks until the year later when that's all complete, right? Because they're gonna just,
It's a conversation we should have. Yeah.
okay.
So one other thing on the spreadsheet, Michael, you still have the skid steer on there, which
Yeah.
is already paid for.
It's already funded, right?
Ah,
Fair,
good point.
yep, fair point, yep.
So Francine, you make a good point. I mean, has anyone heard anything back from Brian Joyce with regards to the sidewalk and the hot patch, as opposed to, grinding the sidewalk and hot patching the drive at the middle high school versus replacing both in their entirety right now?
the only thing I have heard, Brian, is, and this doesn't tell us much, but the repaving of the road was not in his plan for fiscal year 22. But that doesn't tell us much.
Right.
We also, before we start replacing all those sidewalks and everything, we've got to figure out a way to prevent them from getting mushed up, which I think you've made a proposal on. But,
Really just thinking
I
out
don't
loud,
know
trying to
if
get the
that's-
conversation started.
I don't know if that's acceptable to them.
I guess here's my thinking. Per my email, we have to do the track and field first. I think it would be crazy to replace the sidewalk before doing the track and field, because you could bet money that somebody would damage it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're really trying in a race to get the track and field done, by the fall, are we really going to be able to get the sidewalk done also? I think the answer is no. And so then the question becomes, are we really going to replace the sidewalk while school's in session, or are we really talking about, the fiscal 23 cycle, like next summer, when it's actually going to get done?
Mhm.
And if it's really going to get done next summer, let's do it in the next budget cycle.
I agree.
I mean,
That makes sense.
there's an issue there, but there's no solution yet. And I'm not even sure we could execute on a solution between now and next summer, even if we had one. I think it's something to follow up with the schools on. I know they're struggling with their, to get their operating budget done right now, so they're not focused on this. But that's kind of how this feels to me. And so to Ralph's point, I think, I think DPW should go up there and, grind the cracked curb, hot patch the road. Let's get the track and field replaced and come up with a real plan for the next cycle.
Mhm.
And the schools may feel differently. We should talk to them, but that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
I would too.
I have a feeling what you're going to hear from the schools is that the sidewalk they're talking about may not be the lower end of the sidewalk, which is in rather good, in fact, is in perfect condition. They're really talking about the sidewalk up toward the circle where the buses actually turn around.
Okay.
And I do think there's some argument there that those sidewalks are like the ones that go into the field house, as you probably know, which did get replaced, really do need replacing. However, I do agree also that those are the sidewalks over which vehicles will have to run in order to get to the field to replace the track and the turf. So that's the problem with it all.
Yeah.
So, but I think they could do some cosmetic work, which would be very attractive, to be honest with you. Why don't you just round the damn curbs and make them look decent instead of the way they look now? It looks very as if we're not caring for our property very well up there.
Right.
And obviously put in a proper hot patch that they should do in the middle of that roadway. Makes sense.
So Rob, your feeling is for this cycle, let's round the curbs and hot patch the drive
Yeah, sure.
for this cycle.
I'd say we should do that. And I would say ask if there's any serious potential for liability associated with any other part of the sidewalk now that really is in such bad shape that they really need to do it. I don't know if that's true or not. It's certainly not true of the lower end. It may be somewhat true of the upper end. You need to ask that question, I'd say. So that would be an unknown at this moment.
And just to follow up, the buses don't use that circular driveway anymore. They go up the front.
That's interesting.
The circular drive between the school and the track and field is now for parent drop-off. So there's still a lot of traffic coming through there, but it's not the buses coming through.
Okay.
So are we going to put a number in then for CMHS sidewalk and curb?
I hate to fabricate a number. This should really come from DPW. I just can't even begin to guess what the number would be.
Okay.
But
Michelle?
maybe others feel differently.
So I'm asking Brian now what his number would be.
Okay. And Brian Host, tell me what you propose, and I'll just type it in here on the line.
I would put, instead of sidewalk replacement, it's sidewalk repair, and instead of driveway replacement, it's driveway repair.
Very good. So,
Or just put in parentheses repair,
very
you know,
good.
next to replacement, whatever the case may be.
Where is the driveway repair?
Michelle, while Michael's doing that, is there any further discussion about where they're actually going to put the buses near term? Because I know a bus lot is actually part of the Alt Energy solar plan.
Yeah, it is. And as we discussed before, that is the Crocker Lane site, which needs to go before the select board before we can even, discuss it further to see if they have the appetite to purchase that piece of property. If they do, pretty confident we can move to a P&S on that property fairly quickly, close on it right after town meeting, clear it, and have a place for buses starting fall.
But hold on, is that site really big enough for a large scale solar installation?
So what they're talking about for that location is the electric school buses. That is something that's been brought up. And potentially a net zero type of building over there. Like I said, we haven't really discussed it in complete detail because it's something that has to go before the select board to find out if there's an appetite to even purchase that piece of property. And if it is, we can certainly look into the details.
Okay.
I think everyone's been looking at it on the surface, but no one's really dug into it yet.
Right. So
I have
just
a-
so everyone knows, I'd had a separate conversation with Tanya, not about that site, but about potentially a FEMA grant for this fall, which would include a large solar installation as well as electric buses. And the electric buses would be covered as part of the same FEMA grant because they can be used as mobile generators, effectively mobile battery packs, and take them out to the facilities. Instead of having, installations of batteries at all the facilities. And, various sites were bandied about. This was not one of them because it's not really, an appropriate site for large scale solar. But that was the thought. I think, between the Crocker Lane site and the FEMA grant, the bottom line is there are a bunch of moving parts to the long-term solution for the buses. And it seems almost ill-advised to appropriate 200,000 and break ground on a parking lot without, just kind of randomly until we actually have a long-term plan on this.
Ryan, I would agree with you. I also have a question. If we're going to buy one of these sites, where is the money coming from?
So the purchase of the site, if we're talking about Crocker Lane, would come in at about $350,000. So
Well,
it would be a capital request. And something else that we haven't talked about tonight, and I think it needs its own separate meeting, obviously, is the town hall building. So
Is
that's
what?
also town hall building.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Will that be coming in before annual town meeting to our capital stabilization funding?
No. The only thing you'll probably get on the warrant for the town hall is about 700,000 for, I'm just going to call it plans because that's the easy way to look at it. And that would be held in a bond anticipation note to be rolled in to the town hall project once the final, town hall project is known and approved. And eventually that would hit the capital stabilization fund probably as a bonded project, and we'd be paying, we'd have to come up with the debt service every year, which might be in the neighborhood of, depending on how long you bond it for, 20 or 30 years, either 800,000 or 600,000 a year.
Assuming that the project is at the $14 million number.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that number now because I don't have any other better numbers yet. And I think that's safe. And we're figuring 4 million of that from CPC.
Right,
So it brings the town portion down to 10 mil.
right.
And this 700,000 is part of that 14 million. Is that correct, Sam?
Yes, it would be.
It's not in addition to, it's part of
No.
the 14. Okay.
Right. Soft cost. Michelle, did you get an answer back from Brian, Joyce?
I have not.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's
Can I
okay.
ask a quick question back on the bus parking lot? Have we thought about or are there any plans yet for the property on 3A, the Sestito old nursery?
Yes, so Francine, so the town purchased that property, I think maybe it was 2 years ago. And what they're looking to do after phase one is almost do a land swap with the Conservation Trust.
Okay.
Because the piece of land, I guess, that's adjacent to this, from the best of my understanding, is a better piece of land to build on versus the Sestito property. So I don't know what's happened to that yet, but they're not considering that piece of property right now as a viable option for the school buses, only because of the location. And it's just open to, if they're worried about safety concerns over there.
You know, and isn't that really targeted for public safety?
Yeah.
It is, but I think when Francine's talking, I think she's talking more short term, like why can't we just put them there in the short term? And we've asked that question, and
This
unfortunately,
casino property is a lot of wetland. The majority of the area is wetland. There is some upland there, but not, I don't think, enough for a parking lot, let alone a public safety building. I understand.
Well, I don't think that this year we need to fund anything for a school bus parking lot because we really don't have a definitive plan.
Mhm.
I agree.
You know, it's
We-
all.
We have a need, but not a plan. I think that's right.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
have we determined that the full service school bus leasing idea is off the table or?
no, we have, that hasn't been done either, Susan.
Okay. Hey, Mike, one more thing on your spreadsheet. Did we determine that the wall pads for Osgood were staying or going?
We haven't made a decision on that.
Because they're not on their priority list.
Yeah, I thought we scratched it because they weren't on the priority list.
Okay, watch it scratch.
What I had scratched were the clocks, the wall pads, the document carrier cameras, and the water station bottles.
Right.
Okay. The clocks, the wall pads, the document cameras,
Mhm.
and the water station bottles, yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
So you gotta take that out of your total now.
The total, yeah.
Mhm.
Now, do we want to start adding other things into this list?
Sure.
Well, I guess if we could pause for a second, I mean, what you're going to see at this point is the remaining requests are less than the funding available. So we should still go through the other items, but that's what just happened.
We don't have to make a final decision tonight.
Right.
I mean, I have that we've prioritized $1,139,075 so far.
1,256,500.
Yeah, different than what Michael has.
Excuse me?
It's 1,256,500.
Uh-oh, a discrepancy.
Okay, so let's chase that.
So hold on. Hey, Michael,
Yeah.
I just before we move on, I think we all agreed we're taking the bus parking lot off for now. Is that correct?
Yeah. But do we want to leave it on the originally amount requested or?
That's fine.
I think
That's fine.
so, yeah.
Yeah, Will,
Okay, so we're going to leave it in the requested amount. I guess my point is, if you look at our requested amount and back out at this point, and back out, you know, this item that we virtually know we're not funding this year. Okay, you're at 3,075, and if you also back out the cost of replacing the sidewalks and just rounding them instead, and repairing the drive as opposed to replacing it, you know, I don't know what those numbers are, but it's absolutely going to bring you under $3 million, which is the, you know, the funding that we have available to spend.
Mhm.
So that's just the point I want to make. We should still scrub all these other items,
Mhm.
but if what I just said is correct, we have room for the other items.
Mhm.
So Brian, something that you and I spoke of is the air handlers. So
Yes.
right now they're in here. Do I see $750,000?
Correct.
That may also, you may also free up some money there depending on what happens with the MSBA.
Right. But we
We
can't
can't count on it.
on that for
Right.
appropriation purposes. So just to clarify to the broader committee, it appears that the air handlers, you know, do qualify for MSBA funding. So Michelle is working very hard to make sure that we're in front of that process. The application window is going to open in the coming weeks. It'll be open for a brief period. We need to get our application in, but there's a chance that we could get some MSBA match funding for those air handlers.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can't count on that, Brian.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
we probably won't know until before
W-
town meeting.
We definitely won't know before town meeting.
Right. So what we've got here is a list of our approved expenditures at this moment. And if we find that we get some revenue in, then we can open up our discussion to add requests that did not make the final list.
Yep.
You know what's missing here is roads.
I know.
Uh-oh.
And I did hear back from Brian regarding a quick fix at the school.
Yeah.
He did say to patch the concrete would be about $40,000. It would last approximately 2 to 5 years, opposed to doing the new sidewalk, which is a 15 to 20-year time frame. He said to patch the driveway as well is about $30,000 to $50,000, and you're looking at about 2 to 3 years as well, where new would be 15 to 20.
Would last 15 to 20, or you're saying would cost 15 to 20,000?
Would last 15 to 20 years. The cost would be between 30 and 50,000.
Right. So either we do
Ralph,
nothing, or we spend
Ralph, you're
75, 80 and get 3 years of the best out of it.
Ralph, what's your response to that?
Well, it's hard to believe that if you've paid any attention to the Riley brothers and the work that's been done on all of the natural gas lines in town, and after they do their final patching, those patches are 20-year patches. I'm beginning to wonder why people can't do 20-year patches around here. If you've ever looked, you'll find those patches are better than our roads these days, if you've ever paid any attention to what Riley Brothers is doing. So I question whether you can't get a hot patch that isn't going to be of a rather long duration. I also don't understand why it would take $40,000, to be honest with you, to round the current concrete curbs, which would take someone a couple of days with a grinder, and would actually make it not only better looking, but longer lasting, because no plow would actually take that edge off again. So I don't know what the numbers just seem fanciful to me. I hate to say that way, but that's the way it feels to me. So I do still think that you round the edges, you properly patch that area, which was badly done when they put in that drain manhole, and say you've got, and the road is in good shape otherwise. It makes no sense to replace that road. And if it's not on the list, there are an awful lot of roads in this town that are a terrible mess and that deserve to be done first. So
It also makes no sense to me that patching that drain hole would cost $40,000, whereas replacing the entire road would cost $80,000. That makes no sense to me.
makes no sense. No.
So let me ask you a question. Is there someone on this committee that feels well positioned to get in a room with Brian Joyce and Carl Sestito, like in a room or on a Zoom, just the three people, and get to the bottom of this? Because I feel like we're just chasing this in circles.
Well, Brian, remember where the request came from. The request came from the schools.
Yeah.
They wanted it all to look nicer and be better. When
Which makes sense.
Brian about repaving this access road,
Yeah.
he said he didn't have it on his list at this point in time, and it was probably a couple of years out. So, from a DPW standpoint, it's not a critical issue.
Right.
From the school's standpoint, it's something they'd like to have.
I'm just trying to get to a cost number and a plan. I feel like we don't have one.
Yeah, I know.
It seems that there are higher priorities and we should move on from the sidewalk curb discussion at this point. And
I'd leave the sidewalk and curb alone because I think it needs a longer term plan than we're being given just to replace it as it is, because then the plows are going to continue to eat it up. The bus parking lot, we don't do. The Cohasset Middle High School gym entrance, that would be nice, but I don't know if it's critical. The door fobs probably you want to do. The Chromebook leash you probably want to do. And the turf replacement you probably want to do. And I guess we ought to do the pilot technology to figure out whether it works or doesn't work.
I'd suggest
I
maybe
look at it,
in that case, Sam, I would suggest you put a smaller number on it.
Yeah.
In other words, say, this is what we would like to recommend that you do. If you recommend 64,000, you're saying that we're going to allow 16,000 per classroom for 100 classrooms or something. So, you know, you really ought to just, there has to be some sensibility about this whole thing that says we don't have, as we said in the very beginning, that you just simply are not going to have $1.2 million available to spend on classroom technology. And you ought to start with something smaller as your baseline anyway, even on a trial, on a pilot. So
what would you suggest doing for a pilot?
I'd cut it back and make it 32,000. That's 8,000 per classroom, which is a heck of a lot of money to put into technology per classroom. I can tell you.
why not 24,000?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, they were asking for 12,800 per classroom.
Yeah, that seems like an excessive amount of money for a classroom.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So do we just put a number in that we all can agree would be much more, we're more comfortable with? I'm not going to throw away the pilot program. You're going to want to do that. The question is, what's a reasonable starting point for it?
Anybody have any thoughts? I mean, I'd be happy with either 32 or 24.
I would too. I think 24 moves them in the direction of fewer classrooms, and you know they can use, if they want to use it for the full boat technology, then they'll be able to do one classroom and make that work. Or it might encourage them to find other alternatives.
So just a thought, but part of what's driving this is they'd actually want to get a few different types of technology in. So it's not just driven by the number of classrooms that they want to equip with pilot, but they absolutely want to trial the big screen, the touch screen TVs versus the interactive short throw projectors. So I think they're going to want to do at least 2 classrooms. There might be, third flavor of technology that they want to test that I'm drawing a blank on, but I can think right off the top of my head that they want to do at least two classrooms.
And why don't we give them half, as Ralph suggested, and then if they can't stretch it over 4 classrooms, then they can do it between 2, and to your point, Brian, test out at least 2 different options.
I'm still not convinced of the worth of this particular approach. And taking some of the commentary about although we may be chasing Situate, there are other school systems that don't use this. So I would want to have a pilot that is relatively limited in scope. I would advocate for 24.
Well, I think my concern is if we don't let them try the 2 models that they're considering.
Yeah.
And they're going to just come back later and say, well, we didn't really have a good, an opportunity to really figure out what worked and didn't work because we were looking at just one solution.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's your recommended number?
I would have to look back at, what's the, I thought the per classroom number was 16,000. Someone just said 12 a second ago.
I have 12,800 in my head.
On the top of her memo, she said 4 classrooms at 64, so that's.
That's 16 per, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I like Ralph's suggestion of just cutting it in half. That way they have 2 classrooms. They can try out 2 different technologies if they really think it's going to cost 16 per classroom. And I'm not sure what value at Deer Hill and Osgood you get that, you know, middle school and high school is what it ought to be geared towards, but what do I know?
Now, the other thing that I keep looking at in her response to our questions is it requires super teachers. And I'm not totally sure what that means and how many super teachers there are. She obviously is referring to the fact that the teachers need to be those who can utilize this technology well and make it work for the students. But
well, there'll be super users, and which makes sense. I've done that before, or that concept I've worked with before when I was at State Street, when new technology comes out, and they really are just a point person to help troubleshoot. So they're the ones that commit more time and energy to getting up to speed on how to use the technology, and the other teachers can leverage that. And I thought that's how I read her comments back, as being that super users.
Understood what she was
Oh, sorry.
saying.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to then.
Just a question, Francine, for you. It strikes me that you would start with application, then you go to technology. Do you know, are there applications specifically designed for touch screen, flat panel displays? Are there really some kind of teaching application they're actually talking about, or is this a technology that potentially is to be used? I don't understand it exactly. So
I don't either. I don't think they articulated it very well, or in their initial presentation, or in the questions back after, or in the responses back to all our questions. I don't know the answer to that, Ralph. I don't know.
how about your own children? Do you see them using these kinds of applications actually on their Chromebooks and that sort of thing?
So my youngest, this is why I'm so focused on Deer Hill and Osgood. My youngest does use a couple of cloud-based applications. More recently with COVID, the teachers have turned to some learning tools online, but they're very limited. And I think there are 2 in particular, and the kids have to use them for 15 minutes a day. It's not a long period of time that they use them. My 2 high schoolers, I would say not right now. Their online learning is interactive and through Google Classroom. So I don't know that they've got any additional applications that they've been using. I could be wrong, but that's my experience based on 3 kids.
It seems to me that we need to talk with them more. And I don't know if they were invited to come tonight or not.
Well, they were told we would be discussing this.
Then at this point, I would say I'm not comfortable voting for this without better explanation. I appreciate the worth of a pilot, but we're not clear at all on the benefit of the pilot itself. It shouldn't be piloting for the sake of evaluating some technology that may or may not be useful. That's just not strong enough in my mind. So that's where I'm sitting right now. Unless they would like to come and explain or convince us, basically, would they like to come back and really make their case in person and not just rely on a set of answers in a document and then not show up?
I don't think they really know what this is going to do. And that's why they refer to it as a pilot. It's at this point, it's not a necessity. It's something, let's give this a try and see if it works.
All right, so let me offer this. in my work, a pilot follows a proof of concept test. Proof of concept, somebody has a bright idea, and then you put together a little exercise that shows you, yeah, this is workable. So where's the proof of concept on this? What is the concept? Is the concept that using these tools provides more teaching per person per day because we're leveraging technology to get more knowledge across? And we haven't heard any of that. Following proof of concept, you go to pilot, where you use a small number of testers. You've got an hypothesis that you're testing. You're saying, we believe that the following will occur by the use of this equipment. And then you have metrics that bear out or disprove the hypothesis. That is what a pilot is in my world. And just to call something that's an experiment or a trial, to me, it's just not well thought out and not well presented, and doesn't convince myself, doesn't convince me of its merit.
Well, I will see if I can get Lisa to appear next Monday and see if she can answer some more of our questions.
Right.
So in the meantime, I've just been taking all this in, and I feel like to some degree, the conversation may be missing exactly what these devices are and exactly what they do and how they replace things that are happening in the classrooms currently. Right now, look, historically, teachers stood up in front of a whiteboard and put things on the whiteboard, right?
Yeah.
And students had to basically copy the notes by hand, etc. And so, not that long ago, you started to see interactive whiteboards effectively. And we have interactive whiteboards in some of the classrooms. In fact, it may be in many of the classrooms that are first generation, that are, awkward and approaching end of life. Okay. I believe they're smart boards, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong.
No, I think they are.
Okay. And, they allow you to do a bunch of different things, but one of the most important things is allow you to do, a capture effectively of what's been put on the board and save as a PDF. And now the students actually have the notes, right? So during a teaching session, the teacher can teach, the students can focus on following along, as opposed to, having their nose in their notebook taking notes. They can follow along, and at the end of the class, they get a PDF of the teacher's notes. And so that's one of the things an interactive whiteboard does, or at least the first generation of interactive whiteboards would do. What this next generation of interactive whiteboards also allows is basically the interface to the student's PC or the teacher's PC, and allows students from, for example, their desk to actually type on their PC, but maybe put a note, or use their stylus on their touch screen, to actually perhaps make an edit to what is actually up on the interactive whiteboard, and it will appear up on the interactive whiteboard, and things of that nature. We also, I think, historically have all been accustomed to seeing, in our day, you had an overhead slide projector, right, that rolled in on a cart, and teacher would have their cellophane slides and put them up on the wall. Well, this, that was largely replaced by overhead projectors. The problem with those overhead projectors is that the teacher stands between the projector and the board, and the shadow, the content ends up on their forehead and their shadow ends up on the wall. And so that's where the short throw technology comes in. But really, I guess what I would encourage people to think of is that the core of this, not necessarily all the peripherals in terms of the sound system and some of the other bells and whistles here, okay? But the core of this is simply the next generation of the interactive whiteboard. And whether that's a large flat panel touch screen, okay, as opposed to what the first generation interactive whiteboards were, or whether that is a short throw projector with peripherals that sense when you actually mark on a whiteboard and can digitally capture what you're doing effectively on a hard wall and on a projected image. Those two things are doing effectively the same thing. They're integrating the projector technology and the interactive whiteboard technology, into one package, whether it's a touch screen or whether it's a short throw with sensor peripherals around the side. They're basically integrating those two devices into one package, on the wall. And, the teacher and students can all interact on it, either walking up to the whiteboard and participating that way, or by, basically tapping into the whiteboard through their device at their desk. I mean, that's kind of the simplest way I can describe it. The projectors and the touch screens are, only a portion of the cost of this. I mean, we're looking at carts, we're looking at sound systems. It's the bells and whistles that are driving the cost here that give me angst. It's not the core technology. And we will have to replace the overhead projectors and the interactive whiteboards in these classrooms, almost regardless of what happens. So hopefully that's helpful, but I think we're going to be doing projectors and whiteboards no matter what. It's a question of all this stuff that doubles the cost. Part of it's labor, part of it's the sound system. They've got to figure out a way to contain the cost on this and really focus on what we need, what the students need. I don't know if that helps, but
It does.
okay.
It does help, yeah.
And Ralph, to your question, I don't really think it's so much a change of the apps. It's all about putting the apps up, the apps that they use currently, up on the whiteboard, and allowing everybody to interact with them at the same time, not just on their computer.
So where do we go from here? And can we get to Chief Sylvia's request next?
Yeah, I mean, on this, I think really this is a technology trial, and we should try the different technology types. We should equip, however many rooms we need to have an example of each of the technology types, and we should give teachers time to use it and decide what they like best. I'm not sure what the answer is in terms of appropriation and classroom numbers, but
I still think the simplest way is to let them make the decision at 32,000. You can't make the decision for them. You have to say there should be some cap. It's the simplest way to deal with it without trying to actually determine exactly how they'll be used. Just because, quite frankly, the sound systems and some of the other things, quite frankly, are really an awful use of the money of the taxpayers of this town, I can tell you. And a lot of people would be saying, are we crazy to actually use our money this way? If you were doing it personally, would you do this? I mean, the answer is no, you wouldn't. So just let them decide what they can do with 32,000, see if they can make it work. That'll curb some of the excess, I think, here.
Michael, one thing I wanted to point out on your spreadsheet, I think that on lines, they're just so when we look at the numbers, we're looking at them correctly. I think on line 38 and 39 in column E, I think you need to have 25 and 17 in those columns as well. In both columns, otherwise it looks like the total requests is less than what it really is.
Actually, I will plug them in, but this number actually reflects.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It does reflect it. You're right. Forget it. The total.
No, I'll put it in there just because other people
Yeah.
feel the same way. So
No.
Well, does anybody have any more thoughts on all of this?
The other thought I'd have, Sam, is if we say we're going to spend 3 million, whatever it turns out to be.
Yep.
Have you really worked out what we will need as an appropriation from the town going forward the next 5 years in order to cover all the other things that we're actually expected to pay for? In other words, I'm really saying to myself, should we really spend 3 million or not? Or should we actually still have what we really call have a real capital reserve, which is different. That is, the reserve is not to be spent, but is actually to accumulate to cover expenses going forward. So I'm not saying I'm saying we shouldn't spend 3. I'm just saying, what does the broader picture look like? I know you guys were going to talk with Don Pyatt, and at some point it would be nice to have that discussion again to say, okay, if we spend 3 million this year, we have 1 million left. How much are we going to get next year, the year after, and so on? And how much are we committed to spend? So it just the 5-year picture at least would be helpful here in this.
Yeah, well, if you look at the town's proposed 5-year budget overall, they're giving us roughly about $2 million a year into the capital stabilization fund. And if you look at the requests on the 10-year capital plan, they're running 3.5 million, 6 million. Town Hall puts it way up at 14, at probably 15 million for that year, then drops back off to maybe 4 million. But in all of this, there is, I'm going to call it a funding shortfall that is going to catch up very quickly because we're trying to spend more money than we're being given. Now, last fall, which has now been deferred to this town meeting, Chris has plunked an extra 750,000 into the capital stabilization fund. So that brings the income up to 2.7. But that's not locked in. And what I have, when I went to the advisory committee last week, I suggested to them that the amount going into the capital stabilization fund has to be dramatically increased, and that we can't rely on free cash at the end of the year to supplement what we've already been given, because at some point there's going to be no free cash at an end of a year. I don't know when that's going to be. It's happened before, and it'll happen again.
Right.
I don't think the financial management is as strong as it could be, but that's where it's sitting right now. When we go before the selectmen, I plan on making that point. I'm not sure the board of selectmen that we have right now is as financially good as past boards. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but that's the way I feel.
Well, I agree with you completely. I guess the real question is, can we depend on the town? Given the fact that we're going to end up funding $750,000, $800,000 of the bond associated with the town hall project at some point, probably. And because we know we need to spend somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million a year just to keep up, where is what the town has to make a commitment, therefore, not for just 2 million coming from free cash, but probably right out of their budget, they better be sure they have at least 3 million available every year in order to fund the capital stabilization fund. I mean, that's the reality here. And that probably is not enough either. So otherwise, if people think they're going to find some way to actually fund this, the only way they're going to find is tax the people. I mean, that's what happens here,
Ralph, I agree with you.
Yeah. So,
and I just don't think they're looking at it correctly, but.
Yeah. How about the advisory committee? Do they?
I think they were a little better. I'm not sure it fully registered on them.
Okay.
You sort of hope it does, but I mean, Michael, you weren't there, were you?
I was, yes.
Yeah. What was your reaction to the advisory committee?
There were some on the advisory committee that got it, I think.
You've worked with them, so.
Many of them are new, but Jean Dippold, I think, really got the message and expressed herself that way and urged caution. That's the one person that really I noticed. otherwise, I couldn't say for sure out of all of those folks.
Well, Sam, the only reason I bring it up is I don't know that we need to say we have to spend, or we have 3 million to spend. Maybe we should say, maybe we should spend 2.7 or some other number. In other words, isn't there a need to be more conservative, begin to get more conservative now? That's the only question.
So what you're suggesting, Ralph, is that we actually hold back more to make sure that we've got more next year in our capital stabilization fund.
That's exactly how I see it. Yeah.
Right. And how much would you advocate that we hold back?
You know, I think you ought to have 1.5 million, and then you would ask the town for probably something in the order of 2.5, and then you'd probably have enough. So that's kind of how to look at it. And you probably could cover not only the town hall project, but some other things as well. So that's kind of how I would look at it. So you spend 2.5, have 1.5 million left over, get 2.5 from the town each year, then you've got a reasonable chance of, I don't know, getting there. However, without working it out exactly mathematically on a spreadsheet, I can't tell you whether that's accurate, but something in that order.
Right.
Well, if we hold back too much, I can hear Chris saying, well, you don't need any more money. You've got all this in the fund already.
I understand. The reason is that people don't think of the stabilization as a stabilization fund.
Yeah.
It's a misnomer for this. In other words, this is a fund to be spent, not a fund to be set aside for future capital. And that's the problem with the name of stabilization here. It's not being recognized that way. We have other stabilization funds which are actually holding pens for future offsets against untoward events. That's the way we look at it.
Right. So
I'm not
is
sure
everyone
what the-
okay if I change our funding from 3 million down to 2.5 million, which reflects a 1.5 million holdback?
I'm not. I'm taking all this in, but I have a couple of reactions. The first is, we've always had a target of 1, and so moving it to 1.5 is in fact a change in our policy, effectively in our strategy. And I think this late in a year, in a planning year, is not the time to be introducing a new strategy. I guess the second observation I'd make is that, the solution to future years is the funding policy coming into capital. It's not arbitrarily holding back 500,000 in 1 year, which is not going to fix anything other than perhaps next year. And so based on those 2 points, I don't think this is a good thing to do. I do agree with Ralph's point that, we should be pushing hard to get a long-term solution in place. But I see that solution as, people recognizing that we can only spend what they give us, and that if they want us to spend more, they're going to need to give us more. And if they want us to pay for town hall out of the capital stabilization fund, then it's, they shouldn't view that as coming out of the 2 million. They should view that as in addition to the 2 million. And those conversations are taking place. They're not going to get resolved between now and this town meeting, but that's probably, from my perspective, that's not a huge problem because we're not funding the town hall in this town meeting. And I think people know, based on the events of 2018, that, there's a real level of seriousness that needs to be resolved before we fund construction on that building. So those are just my thoughts.
I would agree.
So shall we continue with the $1 million holdback?
Well, let me make this proposal, because we don't have to make it finalized tonight.
Yeah.
I'm going to take our discussion tonight and plop in what we've agreed we should spend, and also include some things that I think we should spend as a matter of course, because we're replacing equipment that's going to make the town more efficient. And then I'll circulate the spreadsheet. I think right now, and I'm in the neighborhood of spending about 2 million, 2 million two, which would leave us plenty in the stabilization fund at this point. And then if we come back to it next Monday night, I'll circulate this to everybody. And if we come back to it next Monday night, we can try to get it more finalized. I do have water on tap for next Monday night to tell us what their planned capital expenditures are. I've got a little information out of sewer, but it's not clear to me yet and not clear what they want to do. So I guess I'm going to say stay tuned.
Okay. Is everyone okay if I use Sam's 2.2 million as the amount of money we're going to allocate at this writing as of now?
Yeah,
I'm just not, I mean, apart from, well, I'm just not sure what that number means.
No, it goes in the opposite direction than what you were just advocating, Brian. But
well, I guess the question, Sam, are you suggesting we're done at 2.2, or are you just suggesting that that's as far as we got tonight?
I'm suggesting this is as far as we've gotten tonight.
That's what I thought. I
we're
think
done.
Michael's interpreting it differently.
okay. So Sam, how much should we leave? How much should we count on for stabilization funding for spring?
How much what?
How much do we have to hand out this spring? Out of the
We
4
have-
million,
In total available funding, and this figure isn't accurate because I miscalculated it when I did this spreadsheet, and Don Piat has corrected me, but what I had was about 3,984,000, and I think it's probably a little less than that. I currently, and I haven't cleared this with the committee at all, this is just my Rube Goldberg, but I've got this to 2 million, just under 2 million two.
For
And
tonight.
that doesn't, yeah, but I've added in the DPW stuff that probably should be funded, in addition to the salt shed.
What
And
DPW stuff did you add in, Sam?
I added in the bucket truck, the slope mower, stand-up mower, chipper. I did not add the skid steer in.
Well, we took that off because it was already purchased, but did somebody earlier ask to not put the bucket truck in? I thought,
yes.
heard that.
Well, I think the bucket truck will, in the long run, save money because they can use it in a variety of uses in addition to DPW, like changing light bulbs, trimming the tree, cutting down and trimming trees and so forth. And that right now they sometimes rent a bucket truck to do that. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it seemed like over a period of about 6 or 7 years, you'd save enough by having your own bucket truck. So that was my logic, but I don't consider any of this final yet. This is just sort of,
Well, I agree that that is probably true over 6 or 7 years, but I'm also thinking that right now, is it necessary to, when we have the other methods that we've previously used to address these things, is it necessary to spend $100,000 right now, almost $150,000 in this funding period for something that we know we can rent a bucket truck at when we need it?
yeah, okay.
So it was probably me, Susan, that you're referring to, and I'm in favor of this purchase. But at the beginning of this call, we were talking about no-brainers, and I interpreted no-brainers as stuff that we absolutely had to do this year. And this is not something we absolutely have to do this year, but I am in favor of doing it.
Okay.
No, I kind of changed the thrust, Brian, from no-brainers to things we'll probably add in.
Okay, fair enough.
But let
And,
me,
Well, could we close on where we are on that? I'm just curious.
excuse me?
Could we close on where we are on what you added in? So you added in all the DPW with the exception of the salt shed?
No, I added in the salt shed at 425.
and then I put in the command vehicle for fire.
Yeah, I never took that out.
Right. So where we sit now, we haven't touched anything for recreation, but where we sit now is at 1.9.
Yeah, but I put in 13,000 for recreation and 30,000 for
Yeah.
recreation.
Okay, so I'm going to put those in now.
I'm so close to getting that done.
So that brings us, well, I'm sorry, I misplaced it, 0 here. Hang on. We're now at 1.96.
Well, I have 2.189, but
Okay, so what am I missing?
mine anyway.
Some of the school stuff.
So in the school, Sam, I've got the bus lease. What, Chromebook lease is not in the schools at the moment. Do we put it in?
Yes.
I put it in.
Okay, so there's one thing I missed. We've got the air handler for DHS, Oscar
Yes.
heads. Nothing for the gym entrance, nothing for the curb repair. We have the CMHS HVAC in, the wood shop dust collector in, the door FOBs.
I put those in.
Pilot technology,
I have nothing for pilot technology.
track replacement, turf replacement.
I mean, I think we'll probably put something in there. The question is how much.
All right, so at the moment, there's still to be TBD.
I'm not really sure we get to negotiate the amount. I mean, these are the numbers.
Well, I'll put 32,000 in then.
For
Well, for
pilot,
pilot technology, fine, but for track and turf, it's up or down. I mean,
all right, so with pilot technology, with the door FOBs, and the Chromebook lease, and with the salt shed and the other DPW requests, and the command vehicle hybrid, and the Sawyer Street Courts, the Milliken concession, we are now at 2.03, 2.08, I'm sorry, Mill. We
I have
still have, if we, say?
I have 2.2.
Okay, so what else do we need to put back in?
Sam probably has the facilities truck, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, let's just go down this line by line. Facilities truck,
Here,
line
you want to know
24.
what? I'll tell you what I have in. Bus lease, 90,000.
Yep,
Sprinkler head, 75,000.
yep,
Air handler, 250,000.
yep.
Rack replacement, 120.
Hold on. Track replacement, 120, okay.
Turf replacement, 500. Chromebook lease, 52.
Yep.
Wood shop dust, 50,000.
Uh,
Pilot technology, 32.
Hold on, Sam, woodshop dust, you've got in at 50?
Yeah, I had it down and they wanted 50,000 for that.
Where did the 38,000 come from?
That was an earlier one and then they upped it.
Ah, okay.
And
So-
I'm still not certain that 50 is going to cover it from everything that I've heard. So I don't know how real this number is.
You don't think the 50 is going to make it?
I don't know. I think we should circle back with facilities.
Okay. That brings our total request to 2.7, Sam.
Yeah.
Well, mine total 2.2, but
And we still have no roads on here, correct?
Correct.
yeah, I don't have, well, because I know nothing about roads right now.
They're in.
Is there a request from roads?
There ought to be, but there's
Every
not
year
on
I
the
thought.
spreadsheet.
Michelle, did roads put in a request?
We did.
How much is it?
I think it's the same they put in every year. I think it's a placeholder of about 300,000.
And are they getting any funding to offset that? Or is that purely what they want to spend out of capital stabilization?
I think that's purely what they want to spend out of capital stabilization.
Okay, I can add that in. That's not a hard thing to do, but
And this is the, we call it the 20-year road replacement.
Yes.
And that's on the OneDrive.
It is.
I missed it then.
So it's,
Yeah, and I know we've got some newer members on the committee, but this was a big topic a couple of years ago. Basically, we should be replacing somewhere around $500,000 worth of roads every year. And so where it landed was we were going to appropriate roughly 300. We also get chapter, is it 91 money,
Mhm.
Michelle? So we also typically
Yes.
get, 100 plus of chapter 91 money. And then depending on how much comes in, we top off the roads program at the end of the year at special town meeting out of free cash. I mean, that's the way this has been working. It's not necessarily the right answer going forward, but just so people know how this has been working.
Understood.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Okay, so Sam, now we're at 3.0 million.
I'm now at 2.5 with the 300,000 for roads.
So you're off by 500,000, which is probably the price of a turf.
The what?
The turf.
Yeah, turf replacement's 500,000.
Is it in yours?
Yep,
You're at 2.5 with the turf.
yes.
How about the CMHS HVAC system?
Wait a minute. HVAC system or the air handler?
But you need to have both. The air handler is the Deer Hill School at 250. And then the CMHS HVAC system is also fundamentally an air handler, and it's in at
I don't
500.
have that at all.
So that's it. It's line 13 on the spreadsheet at 500.
What priority was it?
That's
tied
right up
for
at the
third.
top below the buses.
It was below, not prioritized?
No, it was prioritized. That and the Deer Hill School air handlers are both priority, I think, 2 behind the buses. Hold on. Actually, no, they're tied for
Three.
third. So the buses were number 1, the sprinkler heads were number 2, and then the Deer Hill rooftop air handler and the Cohasset Middle High School rooftop units are tied for third because they're fundamentally the same thing in 2 different buildings.
Yeah, okay, that's probably why I missed
So
it.
that's the difference.
How much is it, Brian?
500.
No, that'll change things a little.
Yeah,
Should bring you up to 3 million, and then your numbers match.
yep.
Yeah, now I'm at 3,021,000.
And I'm
Right.
at 3,016. I'm not sure how we're off by
Yeah,
5,000.
we're off somewhere. Well, I will send this one out that I have. And if we can use that as a master, it would be helpful.
Yours is less than mine, though.
Excuse me?
Yours is $6,000 less than the one I've just constructed here.
If you send them both out, then maybe we can find the discrepancy and make them match.
Well, if it's any crazier, I have one too, and I match Michael.
Whack, whack.
Okay. Well, let me send it out and let's figure out where it's off.
Yes,
The one I'm using is the one I did in priority order,
right.
which I thought was a better way to look at some of these
I
things.
agree. No, I agree. I was just trying to develop.
no, no problem.
What we had. Michelle, should I email this to you?
Please, that'd be great.
Okay. Does the rest of the committee want me to email this one or wait till we get it all reconciled?
Does the committee want a what?
Would the committee like to see the spreadsheet I put together tonight? Or would you rather wait for Michelle to get Sam's and mine and find the difference?
You can send yours to me. That's okay, Mike.
Will do. Anybody else?
I'm going to send mine to everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm all set. I can wait.
And I can post them on the OneDrive.
I'll wait, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's still a work in progress at this point.
Right. So just to recap, we have allocated all of the funds that we believe we have in Capital Stabilization Fund available. And we have left off several items. The Beechwood Courts is out. CMHS sidewalk curb repair is out. CMHS gym entrance is out. The bus parking lot is out. And those are all the items that are out. Everything else is in, except the pilot is cut to 32,000.
That's what I have.
Me too.
Great. So I'll send this. And it's called FY22 requests -MD.
Does
You
anybody at
still there?
this point have anything further?
Very good working session.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I ask one question? Sorry to be that person. So the meeting with the school committee, April 1st, what is that meeting? Only because I'm hosting the Zoom, so I
I have no idea what it is.
So that came out of a discussion that I had with Ellen Maher. We were just comparing notes in a in a non-committee setting as liaisons, and she suggested that given the number of new people on the school committee, that they might benefit from, call it a collaboration session, just to discuss how capital approaches our exercise so that they can better understand what it is we do, how we do it, why we do it. And, have that benefit as they approach their exercise each year. Because I just, some of the resident knowledge, I think has left that board, for lack of a better term, and the relationships and the mutual understanding need to be rebuilt. So that was her request, and I offered to do that as one of the school liaisons, and they requested to actually post it so that all 5 of them could attend. So it's not meant to be
it's not a joint
capital. Sorry?
it's not a joint meeting.
It is, it's posted as a joint meeting only so that in the event other capital budget members show up, we don't breach open meeting law. That's the only reason it's posted that way.
I think it's a great idea, Brian.
So The only
It was
reason,
Ellen's idea, so I just agreed to do it, and I am
think it's
hopeful that it will be constructive.
Well worth our time.
it's definitely a really good idea. I think though, the schools posted it on their side as a joint meeting. I think you have to do the same on your side. So that's the only reason why I'm bringing it up. We've learned that as of late, that if one committee's posting a joint, the other committee also has to post.
Okay,
So you think we should post it?
I think you should post it.
Okay.
let's post it. It doesn't mean we actually have to have a quorum or adjourn or open a meeting.
Correct.
And that's
Let's just post it. If
Thursday?
people show up, we'll officially, start the meeting and we'll officially adjourn at the end. And if people don't show up, then we will not have an official capital budget meeting. It's fine.
Okay, that works.
That's this Thursday, the 1st?
Correct. So we'd have to post that tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll get it out tomorrow.
Okay.
And 7 o'clock?
Yeah. And I don't know what you make the agenda, but it's basically collaboration.
Should I use the same Zoom, Michelle?
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
I would copy exactly what the school has on their agenda. So just to clarify, not the same Zoom we've been using for this meeting, the same Zoom that the schools are using.
Aha,
For
All right,
that
so-
meeting. Yeah.
So let me send that to you, just so there's no confusion.
Thank you.
this is getting more and more complicated.
That's true.
Does anybody have any, Brian, thank you for reminding me. I'd forgotten all about that.
Absolutely. And again, anybody's welcome to attend. Nobody's obligated to attend.
Yeah, I do have it on my calendar, but that means I have to look at my calendar to remember. Does anybody have anything else for tonight?
No?
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, it's a roll call vote. Brian,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Francine,
I think she dropped.
Ralph.
Aye.
No, Francine's still
There
there.
it is.
I dropped and then
Okay.
Francine
I.
and Sam, aye, if I haven't voted.
How about the chief? Are you still there? You awake?
I haven't fallen asleep. No, it's been very interesting to sit here and listen.
All right, man. So we're gonna,
Once you retire, maybe you have to join us.
that's right.
A lot of people have a lot